Who these people were? The group consisted of 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov. They were not amateurs. Several members had military backgrounds. All had completed long winter expeditions before. They understood cold weather survival, navigation, and avalanche risk. Their equipment was appropriate for a Category 3 winter hike, the highest difficulty rating at the time. Their destination was Mount Otorten in the northern Ural Mountains. Remote, harsh, unforgiving, but not unknown. They kept journals, took photographs, logged progress. Their writing showed no signs of panic, conflict, or distress before the final night. The last confirmed entry was routine. No warnings, no fear, no urgency. That detail matters more than most people realize. What the case is, and what it isn't before anyone mentions avalanches, secret weapons, or monsters, I need to establish something. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not mysterious because of what people imagine happened. It's unsettling because of what the evidence actually shows. I have reviewed the original investigation files, the autopsy reports, witness interviews, photographs recovered from the site, and the conclusions of the 2019 investigation conducted by Russian authorities. I've spoken with mountaineers, forensic specialists, and rescue personnel familiar with the terrain. Most explanations people argue about focus on a single moment. That's a mistake. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not defined by how 9 people died. It's defined by the sequence of decisions they made before that. Because trained hikers don't behave this way without a reason, and in this case the reason was never documented. On the night of February 1st, 1959, the group pitched their tent on the slope of Kolatsiakl, not in the forest, on an exposed incline. That decision alone has been debated endlessly, but experienced hikers sometimes choose visibility over shelter when conditions demand it. What happened next is not speculation, it is documented. At some point during the night, the hikers cut their way out of the tent from the inside, not through the entrance, from the interior. They left behind boots, heavy coats, food, and most of their equipment. They exited into sub-zero temperatures. Some were barefoot. Some wore only socks. They did not attempt to retrieve supplies. They moved downhill, away from the tent, toward the forest. This is the moment most explanations fail. People don't abandon shelter in 30-degree C conditions without a compelling reason. And yet, there is no evidence of an avalanche at the tent site. The tent was damaged, but not buried. The poles were standing. Snow accumulation was minimal. The group didn't scatter randomly. They moved with direction. What the search teams found when search teams arrived weeks later: the first bodies were found near the tree line. 2 hikers were discovered beneath a large cedar tree. They were barefoot, lightly clothed. Their hands showed signs of burns, likely from attempting to build a fire. The branches of the cedar were broken several meters up, suggesting someone had climbed it. Why? To look for the tent? To escape something? Or to see something coming? Nearby, 3 more bodies were found between the tree and the tent, positioned as if they were attempting to return uphill. They died of hypothermia. No fatal injuries, but they never made it back. The remaining 4 hikers were not found until months later, buried in a ravine under several meters of snow. Their injuries were different. Crushed ribs, severe internal trauma, minimal external damage. One woman was missing her tongue, another had missing eyes, not removed surgically, likely lost post-mortem due to natural processes, but unsettling all the same. The autopsy reports created more questions than answers. Some injuries were described as consistent with high-force trauma, comparable to a car accident. Yet there were no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no evidence of interpersonal violence. Radiation was detected on some clothing, not lethal levels, but unusual enough to be noted. The official cause of death was listed as compelling natural force. That phrase is not standard forensic language. It satisfies paperwork. It explains nothing. Why their actions matter more than theories. Most Dyatlov theories begin with a cause. Avalanche. Infrasound. Military testing. Wild animals, internal conflict. That's the wrong place to start. The correct starting point is behavior. Because human behavior under extreme stress follows predictable patterns, especially among trained individuals. And what the Dyatlov group did breaks those patterns. Let's talk about the tent. They didn't tear it down. They didn't collapse it accidentally. They cut their way out from the inside. This means whatever triggered their exit was sudden, now internal to the tent, perceived as immediately life-threatening, not inconvenient, not uncomfortable, not gradual. And yet, once outside, they did not behave as if fleeing an avalanche. Avalanche victims run downhill at full speed, scatter chaotically, and seek lateral escape. The Dyatlov hikers moved together, downhill, in a controlled descent. Footprints showed walking, not running. That alone invalidates several popular explanations. Then there's the decision not to return. Experienced hikers know that shelter is survival. Leaving the tent briefly to assess danger makes sense. Failing to return, even after conditions stabilize, does not, unless returning was no longer considered safe. The ones who didn't freeze, the last 4 hikers, tell a different story. Unlike the first 5, they did not die simply from exposure. Their injuries were severe. Ribs crushed inward, skulls fractured, internal hemorrhaging, yet their skin showed minimal external trauma. No lacerations, no bruising consistent with beating, no defensive wounds. Forensic experts later compared these injuries to blunt force compression. Something heavy. Something sudden, but not sharp, and not repeated. Importantly, these 4 were found together, deeper in the forest, inside a ravine that provided partial shelter from wind. They were wearing more clothing than the others. Some garments belonged to the dead hikers near the cedar tree. This tells us something critical. The group split roles. Some attempted survival at the fire. Some attempted return to the tent. Others attempted longer-term shelter construction. That is rational behavior. That is trained behavior. Which means panic alone does not explain this. What modern authorities actually concluded in 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case. They examined 3 scenarios: avalanche, slab avalanche, hurricane force wind phenomena. The final conclusion was a slab avalanche, not a full avalanche. A delayed, partial snow slab that created enough pressure to trigger flight, but not enough to bury the tent. This explanation solves some problems. It explains the tent damage. It explains sudden fear. It explains blunt trauma to the ravine group. But it does not explain everything. It does not explain why the group didn't return after the danger passed AHE, why some hikers moved further into the forest instead of staying near shelter, why injuries varied so drastically, why behavior differed between subgroups. Even investigators admitted this explanation was plausible, not definitive. And that distinction matters. No theory, official or otherwise, fully accounts for the entire sequence. Some facts remain unresolved. Why pitch the tent where they did? Why abandon it without boots or coats? Why not return once immediate danger ended? Or why did some hikers survive longer but make fatal decisions later? The journals stop before answers begin. The camera rolls in before the final hours. There is a missing block of time. And in investigations, missing time is where uncertainty lives. Not monsters. Not conspiracies. Just absence. Why Dyatlov still matters. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not terrifying because it suggests something supernatural. It's terrifying because it demonstrates how quickly certainty collapses in extreme environments. 9 capable people. 9 rational minds. One sequence of decisions that no one fully understands. They weren't reckless. They weren't ignorant. They weren't unprepared. And yet, none of that saved them. Sometimes the wilderness doesn't need to attack. Sometimes it only needs to confuse you for a few minutes longer than your body can afford. That's the real lesson of Dyatlov Pass. And that's why the case never truly closes. People like to say that Alaska eats people alive. That it swallows hikers, hunters, pilots, and spits out bones when it's done. That isn't true. Alaska doesn't hunt. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. I've spent 12 years in search and rescue up here, and I can tell you something most people don't like hearing. Most of the people we look for aren't lost. They didn't wander off the trail. They didn't panic. They didn't make some fatal beginner mistake. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. Until suddenly, they weren't. I didn't join SAR because I like adventure. I joined because my nephew disappeared on a day hike near Hatcher Pass. Clear weather, marked trail, experienced kid. We found him 3 days later, alive, dehydrated, wedged under a rock overhang where no trail should have led him. After that, I couldn't unsee the patterns. So I trained. Tracking. Terrain psychology. Cold weather behavior. Hypothermia logic. I learned how people move when they're scared. How they move when they're injured. How they move when they know they're dying. And I learned something else too. When someone is truly lost, the land tells a story. When they aren't, the story stops. Most searches follow rules. A hiker gets tired. They shortcut downhill. They follow water. They seek shelter when hypothermia sets in. Their gear scatters. Footprints overlap. Mistakes pile up. That's how you find them. And we do. Within 24 to 48 hours, most of the time. That's why the cases that stay with you aren't the ones where people vanish. It's the ones where nothing goes wrong. The first case that broke me happened outside the Chugach Range. Solo hiker, late 30s, former military, proper gear, weather stable. He checked in at the trailhead, planned a loop, never returned. When we found his backpack, it wasn't dropped. It was placed, straps tucked in, zippers closed, water bottle still half full. No drag marks, no sign of struggle, no deviation from the trail. Just an ending. Then came the boots, both of them, side by side. Toes pointing back toward the trailhead. That doesn't happen. Even paradoxical undressing looks chaotic. This was deliberate. Our canine refused to continue past the boots. Not fear, confusion. The handler said it quietly, like he didn't want the forest to hear him. The scent doesn't go anywhere. Over the years, the same details repeated. Gear arranged. Items paired. Footprints that stopped. And always the same phrase in the reports. Search terminated due to terrain hazards. Terrain hazards is a catch-all term. It means cliffs, avalanche risk, thin ice. But sometimes it means something else. Sometimes it means someone higher up told you to stop asking questions. The case I was warned away from happened near a river corridor that doesn't even have a name. Just a grid reference. Experienced hunter, locally known. Grew up in that area. His wife said something that stuck with me. He knew those woods better than our house. We found his rifle leaning against a tree. Clean, oiled, deliberately placed. His radio was still on. Every few minutes it replayed a fragment of his own voice. Not a call for help, not panic, just breathing. That night a state trooper pulled me aside. Didn't look at me. Didn't lower his voice. He just said, "We don't search past that ridge." I asked why. He said, "Because nothing good comes back from there." No paperwork. No formal order. Just an understanding. I crossed it anyway. Just a little. Just far enough to confirm my instincts. The air changed. Not colder. Not warmer, quieter. My radio crackled. Not static, but fragments of old SAR calls. Familiar voices. Out of sequence. My GPS showed movement when I was standing still. And then I saw it. A clearing. Perfectly circular. No tracks entering. No tracks leaving. Just, I stood there for less than a minute. That was enough. Nothing chased me. Nothing followed. That was the worst part. Because when something wants you gone, you feel urgency. This felt like indifference. Like I'd stepped into a place that wasn't finished with something, and I wasn't on the list yet. The case was closed. Official cause. Exposure. Unofficial note. None. The family never got answers. I stopped taking assignments in certain zones, not because I was afraid, because I learned something important. Search and rescue isn't about finding people. It's about knowing when you're allowed to look. I still work SAR. I still believe in logic. But there are coordinates I won't accept anymore. Places where people don't get lost. They just stop being retrievable. And if you ever hear someone say, "They vanished without a trace," understand this. A trace existed. Someone just decided not to follow it. If you hike in Alaska, respect the land. If you get turned around, stop moving, and if something feels wrong, don't wait for proof. Some places don't want witnesses. They don't need them. And some searches aren't meant to end with answers. The desert doesn't lose people. It erases them. I'm a search and rescue coordinator for a county sheriff's department in the Southwest. Most people think desert rescues are simple. Flat land, open visibility. No trees, no cliffs, no avalanches. That's wrong. The desert doesn't hide you. It removes you. I learned that in the summer of 2019, working the corridor between an abandoned mining road and a dried river basin that doesn't even show up on most maps. The call came in just after noon. 2 hikers overdue, male and female. Early 30s. Rental SUV found parked legally on the shoulder. Keys still inside. That alone wasn't strange. People underestimate distance out here all the time. They think the horizon is close because they can see it. The first thing that didn't fit was the time math. The couple had left their hotel at 6:40 a.m. The car was found at 8:05 a.m. The trail they supposedly took leads nowhere worth hiking to. No viewpoint, no rock formation, no water source. Just a stretch of hard-pan desert that locals don't walk unless something went wrong. We arrived on scene at 1:30 p.m. Heat was already pushing 112 degree F. The SUV looked untouched. No signs of struggle, no broken glass, no note. Inside were 2 full water bottles still cold from the hotel fridge. That bothered me. People heading into the desert don't leave water behind. We found footprints almost immediately. 2 sets, side by side. Normal stride. They headed straight off-road. No hesitation, no wandering. Like they were walking towards something they could see. After about 400 yards, the footprints changed. Not direction. Behavior. The steps became shorter, closer together, uneven. One set began to drag slightly. That's when heat exhaustion usually starts. But then something happened that made every one of us stop walking. The footprints ended. Not faded. Not scattered. Ended. Hard stop. 2 last impressions in the sand. No collapse mark. No body imprint. No disturbance. Just absence. We spread out. Grid search. Drones, helicopter. From the air, the desert looked untouched. No tracks beyond that point. No shadows hiding anyone. No rocks large enough to shelter a body. Just open land and heat shimmer. At 3:12 p.m., one of the deputies called me over. He'd found a backpack. It was upright, not thrown, placed. Inside were snacks, sunscreen, phones, wallets. Both phones still had signal. No outgoing calls. No emergency texts. The last photo on one phone was time-stamped 8:21 a.m. It showed the desert ahead of them. Nothing unusual. Except the caption. Do you hear that? There is no sound like that out there. No wind. No insects at that hour. No birds. Just heat and silence. We searched until nightfall. Nothing. No bodies. No clothing. No blood. No signs of animals. The next morning we went back. That's when we found the shoes. 2 pairs, placed neatly side by side, facing back toward the car. No footprints leading away from them. I've seen hypothermia victims do that. Not heat victims. The geologist we brought in said something that still sits with me. He pointed at the ground where the footprints stopped and said, "This soil layer here, it was disturbed vertically." I asked what that meant. He hesitated, like something pressed down hard and then released. Not dragged, not lifted, released. The case was closed after 72 hours. Probable heat-related disorientation. Victims wandered off trail. Bodies unrecovered? That's what the report says. But here's what doesn't make it into the report. 3 weeks later, a rancher called in about voices. He said he could hear people talking near the dry basin at dawn. When deputies arrived, there was nothing there. But the audio from the cruiser dash mic picked something up. 2 voices. A man and a woman, calm, conversational, talking about water. The timestamp matched 8:21 a.m., the same time as the photo. We don't run searches in that area anymore. Not officially. It's marked as low probability zone. But every summer around the same week, hikers report the same thing. A sense of direction that feels too confident. A feeling that the heat suddenly stops bothering them. The sound of something just out of hearing range. And sometimes they turn around and realize they don't know how long they've been walking. The desert doesn't chase you. It doesn't trap you. It convinces you to step forward. And once you do, it doesn't need to do anything else. Everyone who stopped at mile marker 44 disappeared. I'm a state trooper assigned to a mountain highway that cuts through national forest land in the northern Rockies. Most people don't remember highway numbers, but everyone who works this road remembers mile marker 44. Not because of accidents, because of stops. The first time it happened, nobody noticed the pattern. A sedan pulled over at night. Engine running, driver missing, no signs of a crash, no skid marks, no call to dispatch. Just a car that had stopped and never left. Mile marker 44 sits on a long downhill curve. Not sharp, not dangerous, no guardrail issues. Visibility is clear in daylight. At night, the forest presses in so close the headlights feel swallowed. The official explanation was fatigue. Drivers pulling over to rest, wandering off disoriented. Hypothermia. That explanation works, until you see the logs. I was reviewing old incident reports in 2021. Routine audit. That's when I noticed something strange. Every abandoned vehicle found in that 12-mile stretch was logged within 300 feet of marker 44. Different years, different seasons, different vehicle types. Same location. The second thing that stood out was time. Every report listed the discovery time between 2:11 a.m. and 2:24 a.m. Not when the drivers disappeared. When the vehicles were found. The third thing was what wasn't in the cars. Shoes, phones, wallets, gone. Not stolen, removed. The first case I worked personally happened in late October. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the temperature dropped fast after sunset. A pickup was reported blocking part of the shoulder near marker 44. I arrived at 2:18 a.m. headlights on. Driver's door open. Radio playing quietly. No driver. No footprints in the gravel. That's not unusual in snow. When I leaned into the cab to turn off the engine, I noticed something odd. The interior was warm. Not heater warm. Body warm. Like someone had just stepped out seconds earlier. I stepped back. That's when I heard it. Not from the forest. From the road itself. A low sound. Like wind rushing through a narrow space. But there was no wind. My headlights flickered. Just once. I looked up at mile marker 44, and for a moment, I swear this is true. The number wasn't there. Just a blank metal post. Then it was back. Backup arrived 14 minutes later. They searched the area. Found nothing. No tracks. No disturbance. No explanation. The driver was never found. After that, I started checking older case files more closely. I noticed something no one had connected before. Every missing driver had pulled over voluntarily. No engine failure, no collision, no pursuit. No pursuit. They stopped. One file from 1996 included a cassette tape recovered from a vehicle. It was still labeled as evidence. I requested to listen to it. The tape contained about 40 seconds of audio. At first, nothing but road noise. Then a man's voice. Calm. Confused. He said, "I think I missed something." Then silence. The most disturbing case happened during a snowstorm. A family SUV disappeared with 3 occupants. The vehicle was found 2 days later, parked perfectly straight. No snow inside the wheel wells, like it had arrived after the storm. There were footprints this time. 3 sets. They walked away from the vehicle together, then merged, not overlapped, merged, into a single track. That track led directly into the trees. It ended. I spoke to a retired ranger who worked the area in the 1980s. He said the Forest Service had an unwritten rule. Never stop at marker 44. If you had to pull over, drive past it, even if your engine overheated, even if your tire blew. I asked him why. He said, because that spot doesn't belong to the road. The night I finally understood was the night I almost stopped myself. I was driving patrol at 2:16 a.m., snow falling lightly, visibility low. I felt tired, heavy-eyed. The pullover urge hit me suddenly, strong, like an instinct. I saw the marker ahead. The thought crossed my mind. Just stop for a second. My radio crackled. Dispatch called my unit number. They asked if I was okay. They said my GPS had stopped moving. I looked down. My speedometer read 0. My foot wasn't on the brake. I was rolling, but slowly, toward the shoulder. I slammed the accelerator. The engine surged. The moment I passed marker 44, the feeling vanished. Instantly. Later, reviewing my dash cam, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The footage froze for 12 seconds as I approached the marker. During that freeze, the audio continued. You can hear my breathing, then a second set of breathing. Not since with mine. Closer. That footage is now archived and restricted, officially due to equipment malfunction. Unofficially, because no one wants to explain why a stretch of road convinces people to stop. Mile marker 44 is still there. No sign, no warning. Just a number. And a place where people decide, for reasons they can't explain, to pull over and never leave. The lighthouse was still operating. No one was inside. I'm a former Coast Guard officer assigned to maritime search and rescue along the northern coastline. If you work the ocean long enough, you learn one thing early. The sea doesn't need violence to kill you. It just needs you to make one small decision at the wrong time. That's why lighthouses exist. And that's why this case never made sense. The call came in just before dawn. Automatic alert from a coastal lighthouse that should not have been transmitting. The station had been officially decommissioned 5 years earlier. No keeper, no maintenance crew, no power line. Yet the beacon was on, rotating, perfectly timed, operating exactly as it had when it was still manned. The lighthouse sat on a rock outcrop locals avoided. Not because it was dangerous, because it was quiet, even for the coast. Fishermen didn't anchor near it. Boats adjusted course without discussing it. Radar operators flagged it as clear without ever zooming in. You learn not to question habits like that. Until you have to. We approached through heavy fog. Visibility dropped to less than 30 meters. The sea was calm, unnaturally so. No swell, no chop, no wind. Sound behaved strangely. Radio transmissions echoed back, slightly delayed, as if bouncing off something closer than the shoreline. When the lighthouse came into view, my first thought was relief. Light means people. That was my mistake. The dock was intact. Lines neatly coiled. No signs of damage, no emergency flares. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lighthouse looked maintained, not abandoned. Logbooks stacked. Equipment dust-free. Kettle still on the stove. Cold, not recently used, but not old either. Like time had stopped being consistent. The logbook was the worst part. Entries were written in a steady hand. Professional, routine, weather observations, visibility notes, passing vessels. The last entry was dated 3 days earlier. It ended mid-sentence. No panic. No warning. Just stopped. We searched the structure top to bottom. No keeper. No signs of struggle. No blood, no personal items missing. The radio room was still transmitting. Power was being drawn from somewhere. Not the grid, not backup generators. The system was running in a closed loop, like it didn't need an external source. That's when the foghorn sounded. Long, low, manual. The control lever was old school, mechanical. It required a person to pull it. Every head on my team turned at once. The foghorn stopped. No footsteps, no movement, just silence again. We pulled back to the boat. That's when the fog thickened. Not gradually, instantly. Radar went unreliable. GPS drifted. Compass headings fluctuated by several degrees. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make you second-guess every correction. A mayday call came over the radio. Not from our channel. An old frequency. Analog. The voice was calm. Male. He said, "Visibility is 0. Light is on. I don't see anyone." That call was time-stamped 27 years earlier. We left the area once the fog lifted. When we looked back, the lighthouse light was off. The official report states, automated system malfunction. No personnel present, no further investigation required. That's accurate, incomplete, but accurate. 2 months later, a cargo ship reported seeing the light again. Same timing, same rotation pattern, they altered course. Didn't report it officially, just mentioned it casually during a port interview. That's how these things survive, not by being hidden, by being ignored. I asked a retired lighthouse keeper about it. He didn't laugh. He didn't question me. He just said, "That station doesn't guide ships anymore. It marks a boundary." I asked him between what and what. He said, between where the coast is and where it pretends to be. The lighthouse still appears on radar sometimes. Only in fog, only before dawn. No distress calls are logged anymore. Just routine acknowledgments, like someone is still doing their job. And if you work the sea long enough, you learn another rule. If a lighthouse is working, but no one is inside, you don't get closer. You thank it for the warning, and you change course. The tunnel was still in use. No one was on the schedule. I work night maintenance and incident response for a metropolitan transit authority. Subways don't sleep. They just get quieter. That's when you notice things you're not supposed to. Most people think tunnels are empty at night. They aren't. They're inspected. They're monitored. They're logged. Every train movement, every power draw, every door opening is time-stamped, which is why this case was impossible. The alert came in at 1:37 a.m. Unauthorized power draw on a decommissioned tunnel segment. That line had been closed for 6 years. No trains, no staff, no scheduled maintenance. The system flagged it as a sensor error. It would have stayed that way if the draw hadn't repeated. Exactly every 9 minutes, I was dispatched with a transit police officer. Standard protocol. We entered through an access hatch that hadn't been opened in months. Dust undisturbed, locks intact. The tunnel smelled? Used, not moldy, not stale, warm. That shouldn't happen underground without airflow. The lights were off. Emergency strips along the wall activated when we stepped inside. Ahead of us, deeper in the tunnel, something else was glowing. Station lighting. That section wasn't supposed to have power. As we walked, the radio started dropping syllables, not static. Missing words. Dispatch would say, "Confirm location." And nothing after. Our replies went through. Theirs didn't come back. We reached an old platform. Not on any public map. It was never meant for passengers. Just a turnaround point from a design that was abandoned mid-construction. The benches were dusty, except one. That one was clean. A digital display above the platform flickered on. White text on black. No line number. No destination. Just a time. 1:46. That was 9 minutes after the initial alert. The power draw spiked. I felt it through the floor. Not vibration. Pressure. Like the air compressing slightly. The officer next to me said something I didn't hear. I asked him to repeat it. He said he hadn't spoken. Footsteps echoed down the tunnel. Not running. Not dragging. Measured. Approaching from the direction the tunnel should have ended. There is no continuation past that point. The schematics stopped. The footsteps paused. Then the display updated. 1:55. Another 9 minutes. The benches stayed empty. But the air shifted. You can feel when something occupies space, even if you can't see it. The officer took a step back. I didn't tell him to. He said later he felt like he was standing too close to the edge. Our radios clicked on. A voice came through. Calm, neutral. Male, neutral. He said, "Stand clear of the platform. That phrase is still used, but not on that line, and not in that voice. The lights surged. For a fraction of a second, I saw movement in the tunnel. Not a person, not a shadow, just a distortion. Like heat haze in a place that shouldn't have heat. Then everything went dark. Emergency lighting kicked back in. The display was blank. The tunnel was silent again. No footsteps, no power draw, nothing. We exited immediately. Back in the control room, the logs showed nothing. No alert, no spike, no dispatch record. Except one entry. Manual override logged at 1:46. Operator ID unknown. Transit police sealed the access point. Official explanation. Sensor malfunction. Unofficial instruction. Do not enter closed tunnels during power anomalies, especially on a 9-minute cycle. 2 weeks later, a night janitor reported hearing an announcement from a tunnel wall. No speakers, just a voice telling someone to mind the gap. The old platform doesn't appear on updated schematics anymore, but sometimes during overnight system checks, a phantom station shows up in the diagnostics. No name, just a timestamp. Always in 9-minute increments. Tunnels don't create things, they preserve them. Schedules, movements, routines. And sometimes, when the city gets quiet enough, they keep running something long after everyone else has left. I still work nights. I still respond to alerts. But if a decommissioned line shows activity now, I do one thing first. I check the interval. If it's 9 minutes, I close the ticket. And I don't go underground. The ward was close. The monitors were not. I'm a hospital facility supervisor assigned to overnight incident response. Night shifts in a hospital aren't quiet. They're just more honest. Machines don't sleep. Systems don't rest. And when something activates at night, it does so without an audience. That's why this case mattered. The alert came in at 2:04 a.m. A biomedical alarm from Ward C. A unit officially closed after a structural refit. No patients, no staff, no scheduled maintenance. The system flagged it as a sensor ghost. Old wiring, legacy equipment. That happens. What didn't happen was the alarm clearing. It repeated every 6 minutes. Ward C had been sealed for 11 months. Doors locked. Gas lines capped. Power isolated except for life safety circuits. The hall outside was dark, but when I reached the access door, I noticed something wrong immediately. The corridor was warm. Hospitals regulate temperature aggressively. A closed ward shouldn't drift. Warmth means load. Something was drawing power. The door opened without resistance. No forced entry. No broken seal. Inside, the lights were off, but not dark. Emergency strips glowed along the baseboards, the kind that only activate when motion or presence is detected. I stood still. The lights remained on. The first monitor was active. Cardiac telemetry, green trace, regular rhythm. No patient assigned. The bed beneath it was made. Sheets tight. No indentation. The trace continued. I checked the nurse station. Dust everywhere, except the keyboard. That surface was clean. The terminal was logged in. User, night charge status. Active. There hadn't been a night charge nurse assigned to Ward C since the closure. The alarm repeated. 6 minutes. Same tone. Same duration. Biomedical alarms don't trigger without parameters crossing thresholds. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, movement. Someone, or something, was meeting criteria. I called engineering. My words cut in and out, but the reply came back whole. They asked if a patient had been transferred without notice. I said no. They asked me to confirm the bed number. When I looked back at the monitor, the bed number had changed. Not incremented, replaced. The intercom crackled. Hospitals use overhead paging sparingly at night. This was local. A calm voice said, "Please remain in your room." It wasn't automated. I could tell by the breath between words. I moved down the hall. Every other room was dark. One room had its privacy curtain drawn. The monitor outside that door showed vitals. Normal. Too normal. No variability. No noise. Human vitals fluctuate. These didn't. The door handle was warm. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The chart clipped outside the room was blank, except for a timestamp. 2:10, 6 minutes after the first alarm. I backed away. As I did, the emergency lights dimmed slightly, like the ward was conserving power. The telemetry alarms stopped. All at once, silence returned the way it does in places that weren't meant to be observed. Back in the control room, the logs told a different story. No alarms, no access, no user activity, except one entry. Patient monitoring resumed. 2-4, 222 discontinued by system. No operator ID. The next night, security reported footsteps in Ward C. No camera coverage. Those had been removed during refit. Thermal sensors showed brief heat signatures near the nurse station. Not human-shaped, just present. Administration closed the incident. Official cause, residual power bleed. Unofficial instruction. Do not enter closed wards alone at night. They didn't say why. Hospitals learn quickly what questions slow things down. 2 weeks later, a nurse floated from another unit swore she heard a monitor alarm while passing Ward C. She stopped, listened, counted. 6 minutes between tones. She didn't file a report. She asked to change units. The ward remains closed, but the life safety system still pings it occasionally during night audits. When it does, the temperature rises by exactly 1 degree. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to suggest occupancy. Hospitals don't create patients. They record them. And sometimes when systems are left running without people to correct them, they continue doing what they were built to do. Monitor, observe, maintain. Even when there's no one officially assigned. I still work nights. I still respond to alarms. But if a closed ward shows vitals now, I follow protocol. I acknowledge the alert. I log it. And I don't open the door, because some systems don't forget what they were meant to care for. They just keep doing it. I was a 911 dispatcher. Some calls never end. I worked as a 911 dispatcher for almost 11 years in a mid-sized county in the Pacific Northwest. If you've never sat behind one of those consoles, let me explain something most people don't understand. We don't just answer phones. We log voices, we track locations, we build timelines that become evidence. Every call has a beginning, a middle, and almost always, an end. Almost. This is about the calls that didn't. Dispatch is supposed to be contained. You leave the building, the radios stay behind. At least that's what they tell you during training. I was good at the job. Calm voice, fast typing. I could de-escalate panic without raising my tone. I handled overdoses, domestic violence, suicides, active shooters. You name it. I believed in procedure. Procedure keeps chaos from spreading. That belief lasted until call ID C11,789. The call came in at 2:17 a.m. Male voice. Calm, controlled. No background noise. I'm lost. I need help. Standard opener. I asked for his location. There was a pause. Not static, not breathing, just absence. I'm still on the road, he said. I've been driving for a long time. I asked what road. The same one. That's when I noticed something strange. The system couldn't lock his location. No cell tower triangulation. No GPS metadata. Just a blinking cursor where coordinates should be. I flagged it for supervisor review and kept him talking. He wasn't distressed. No fear. No urgency. That alone was wrong. Lost callers ask about exits, landmarks, gas stations, lights. This man asked none of that. Instead, he said, "How long do calls like this usually last?" I told him we stay on the line until help arrives. Another pause. "That's good," he said. "I didn't want it to end yet." I dispatched a patrol unit anyway, routing them to the last known tower ping, nearly 40 miles of rural highway. The officer radioed back 10 minutes later. No stalled vehicle, No headlights. No tire tracks. The call disconnected at exactly 2:34 a.m. 17 minutes. The same call came back the next night. Same voice. Same calm tone. Same absence of background noise. Different call ID. "I'm still on the road," he said. I asked if he remembered calling us before. "Yes," he replied. "You were very patient." That sent a chill through me. Calls don't remember us, people do. The system again failed to locate him. This time he added something new. "You didn't send anyone far enough." Over the next 6 weeks, the calls continued. Always between 2:00 and 2:20 a.m. Always calm. Always polite. Always exactly 17 minutes long. Every dispatcher who answered reported the same thing. No location data, no engine noise, no wind, no radio interference, just a voice and silence. We rotated operators, changed protocols, tried reverse tracing through carriers. Nothing. One night, a rookie dispatcher asked the caller how fast he was driving. "The speed limit," the voice replied. "I never break rules." Then came the night it escalated. I was off shift, at home, asleep. My personal phone rang at 2:17 a.m., unknown number. I answered before I was fully awake. "You sound different outside the building," the voice said. I sat straight up in bed. Dispatch lines are isolated, unlisted, unreachable from civilian networks. I hung up. The call log showed 17 missed calls, all from different numbers. All time stamped 2:17 a.m., all exactly 60 seconds long. Internal Affairs investigated. Official conclusion. System glitch, call routing anomaly, dispatcher fatigue. They reassigned the incident code. But one supervisor pulled me aside afterward. Indoors. No radios on. He said, "You're not the first dispatcher to get one of those." I asked him how many. He didn't answer. My final shift came 3 months later. At 2:16 a.m., my console lit up. No caller number, just an open line. I didn't speak. Neither did he. Then quietly, "I'm almost done now." I asked him with what, learning the voices. The line stayed open for 17 minutes. After it ended, my terminal rebooted itself. The incident log for that hour was blank. I resigned 2 weeks later. New job, new number, different city. It didn't matter. Sometimes my phone rings once at night and stops. Sometimes my voicemail fills with silence, exactly 1 minute long. And sometimes, when I'm driving late on empty highways, I catch myself checking the mirror. Because for the first time, I understand something I didn't before. That voice was never lost. It was practicing. Dispatch teaches you that every call represents someone reaching out from chaos into order. But what they don't teach you is this. Some systems answer anything that calls long enough, and some calls don't need help. They just need someone to listen. If you're still listening, that means you're safe. For now. Most people think stories like this end when the call disconnects, when the radio goes quiet, when the road finally runs out. They don't. Some voices don't need a line to stay open. Some systems never really hang up. So if your phone rings tonight, and no one speaks on the other end, don't rush to fill the silence. Just remember, someone might be listening, the same way you are right now. This is Ranger Whispers, and some calls were never meant to end. The missing time calls, real 911 phenomenon. There are rules in emergency dispatch. Every call has a timestamp. Every call has an origin. Every call has a caller. When one of those is missing, the system flags it. When all three are missing, the system isn't supposed to accept the call at all. But sometimes, it does. In the late 1990s, a county emergency communications center in the Midwest began documenting a strange irregularity. It only happened on night shifts, always between 1:40 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., never during storms, never during outages. Dispatchers would receive incoming 911 calls that AE had no phone number, showed no GPS or cell tower origin, and carried no audible background noise, just a live line. Breathing. Not heavy breathing. Not panicked breathing. Controlled. Calm. Like someone waiting to speak. At first, dispatchers assumed system glitches, until callers began answering questions. When asked, "What's your emergency?" the voice would pause, then respond, "I don't know where I am anymore." Always male or female, never children. Always clear, no static, no distortion, and always unfamiliar. Dispatch would ask for landmarks. The answer was always the same. I was driving. Then I wasn't. Here's where it became disturbing. When supervisors reviewed recordings later, the calls weren't there. No audio. No waveform. No saved file. Just a log entry showing incoming call, duration, 00, but dispatchers remembered talking to someone for minutes. Sometimes 10. Sometimes longer. Clocks inside the room never stopped. But dispatchers began reporting the same sensation. It felt like time folded inward. After months of quiet documentation, a pattern emerged. Every caller said some version of the same thing. They'd been driving alone, late at night, on familiar roads, when everything suddenly went quiet. No engine noise, no road sound, no radio. And then their phone rang. Not their phone ringing out. Their phone ringing in. One caller said, "My screen says I'm calling you, but I never touched it." At first, dispatchers asked, "Can you see your surroundings?" But after several calls, they stopped. Because the answer was always identical. No, there's light, but nothing in it. Some callers tried opening doors. They said the doors opened. But nothing changed. No wind, no sound, no sense of movement. Just light and silence. In 2002, a senior supervisor stayed late to monitor one of these calls, Liv. She listened through a parallel headset. The caller spoke calmly for nearly 7 minutes. Then he said, "I think I see headlights." Dispatch asked where. The caller replied, "Behind me. But they aren't getting closer." Then his voice changed. Not scared, relieved. "Someone else is here now." The line disconnected. The supervisor immediately pulled the recording. It didn't exist, but the headset she'd been using was still warm. Shortly after, an internal memo was circulated. Unofficial. Not archived. It instructed dispatchers to log the call, avoid extended questioning, never request physical movement, never request physical movement, never ask callers to leave their vehicles, and most importantly, do not attempt to locate. Because every attempt to triangulate these calls returned the same result. Location, unresolvable. The final documented incident happened in 2007. A caller stayed on the line for nearly 12 minutes. Near the end, dispatch asked, "Can you tell me what you see now?" The caller paused, then said, "I see cars, a lot of them, parked. No one inside." Dispatch asked if they were on a highway. The reply came quietly, "I think this is where people end up when they never make it home." The call ended. No crash was reported. No missing person matched the voice. After 2007, the calls stopped. No explanation was ever given. Some believe a routing upgrade fixed the issue. Others don't. Because several retired dispatchers later admitted something quietly. The calls didn't stop. They were just no longer answered. Any call without origin data now auto-terminates. No one listens anymore. Years later, during a training seminar, a former dispatcher said this. Every voice sounded different, but they all spoke like they were waiting, not to be rescued, just acknowledged. And then she added, "I still wonder what happens when no one picks up. If you're listening to this late at night, and your phone hasn't made a sound in a while, just know this, not every call is meant to be answered. Some of them already were, by someone else. Those voices weren't asking to be saved. They weren't asking for directions. They were calling to make sure they still existed, somewhere. And when the line goes silent, it doesn't mean they hung up. It means no one is listening anymore. So if your phone lights up tonight, with no number, no vibration, no reason, don't panic. Just remember, someone somewhere has been waiting a very long time for a voice on the other end. And now, You're the one holding the line. The station that never answers. I'm not telling this story because I want attention. I'm telling it because the station still calls. And sooner or later, someone is going to answer. I used to believe that abandoned places were just empty. Buildings without people, rooms without voices, stations without purpose. I don't believe that anymore. Because some places don't stop working when people leave. They just keep going. The station I'm talking about doesn't scream. It doesn't send distress calls. It doesn't ask for help. It just checks in, on schedule. Every night, like someone is still there, doing their job. And the worst part is, for a long time, nobody noticed anything was wrong. My name isn't important. What matters is what I did for a living. I was a federal land management officer assigned to the southern New Mexico desert. If you know the area, you know what that means. Miles of nothing. Flat land that swallows sound. Old access roads that don't show up on GPS. And infrastructure left behind from decades of half-finished projects. Our job wasn't dramatic. No rescues, no gunfights, no monsters. We maintained stations, checked radios, verified logs, made sure nothing that was supposed to be quiet suddenly wasn't. Most people don't realize how much of the country still runs on outdated systems. Analog radios, legacy frequencies, old call signs nobody remembers setting up. That's where this story begins, with a line item in a system audit. Station designation, NMA 17. Status, active. Last maintenance check, over 12 years ago. That alone wasn't strange. Some stations stayed listed as active long after they were shut down. Paperwork lagged. Budgets shifted. Nobody bothered to clean things up. What caught my attention was something else. NMA 17 was still checking in. Automated check-ins, sure. But also manual acknowledgments. Responses that weren't generated by a machine. Short transmissions. Correct format. No emotion. NMA 17 standing by. Routine patrol complete. Nothing to report. All of it time-stamped during overnight hours. At first, I assumed it was a relay glitch. Some other station bleeding over onto the frequency. Maybe a repeater mislabeling packets. I logged a ticket and forgot about it. 3 nights later, it happened again. I was monitoring late shift traffic when NMA 17 checked in, right on time. Dispatch didn't respond. They never did, but the system logged the transmission anyway. I pulled the station file. The physical location was still listed. Coordinates still valid. The access road still technically existed, though it hadn't been serviced in years. Personnel assignment? None. Every name previously attached to NMA 17 had been reassigned, or retired, or deceased. 2 of them had died more than a decade ago. That's when I should have escalated it, filed a formal anomaly report, sent it up the chain. Instead, I did what field officers always do. I decided to take a look myself. The drive took most of a day. If you've never been out there, it's hard to explain how empty New Mexico can feel. Not quiet. Empty. The kind of place where sound doesn't echo because there's nothing to echo off of. The kind of place where you stop seeing roadkill because even animals avoid it. The station sat at the end of a dirt spur road, barely visible through the dust. A single-story concrete structure. Faded federal signage. A radio mast still standing. No vehicles. No footprints. No fresh tire tracks. But the door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled stale but not rotten, like a place that had been sealed, not abandoned. The lights didn't work. The generator was dead, but the radio console was on. Power indicators glowing faint green, running off a backup system that should have died years ago. I checked the logbook. That's when I saw the handwriting. Neat, professional, recent. Entries dated within the last week. Routine notes, weather observations. Patrol confirmations, no names. Just initials. Initials that matched personnel who were no longer alive. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the equipment. No voices, no static, just a station waiting to be acknowledged. I didn't transmit that night. I powered everything down, sealed the building, and reported the station as inactive. The next morning, my supervisor called me. He asked why I'd been near NMA 17. I told him what I found. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said something that still bothers me. "We don't service that station anymore." I asked him why it was still checking in. Another pause. Then, "Don't respond if it does." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. 2 nights later, NYC Dordan. Same format, same calm tone. And for the first time, it addressed me by call sign. I didn't answer the transmission. I just stared at the screen as my call sign sat there in plain text, like it had always belonged in that station's vocabulary. NMA 17 didn't repeat itself. No follow-up, no correction, just silence. Just silence. That should have been the end of it. A system hiccup. A coincidence. But the next night, it happened again. Same time. On a mile. Waller, in my voice shows stand by, awaiting acknowledgement. Still my call sign tagged to the transmission. I logged out of the system and went home, telling myself I was overthinking it, that maybe my name had been auto-assigned somewhere it shouldn't have been. At 2:17 a.m., my work phone vibrated on the nightstand. No ring, no notification tone, just a vibration. I need to be clear about something before I go any further. I don't tell these stories to scare people. Fear is easy. Fear fades. Fear makes good headlines. What I'm talking about doesn't fade. I've spent most of my career as a park ranger assigned to search and rescue operations across multiple national parks in the United States. That means missing hikers, lost hunters, injured climbers, people who underestimate terrain or weather and pay for it. Those cases make sense, even the tragic ones. Hypothermia has patterns. Falls leave evidence. Predators don't clean up after themselves the way movies suggest. When we don't find someone right away, we usually understand why. But there is another category of cases. Internally, we don't give them a formal label. Not in reports, not in training manuals. But every ranger who's been around long enough knows what you mean when you bring one up. They're the cases where the system does everything right and still comes up empty. People like to imagine disappearances happening deep in the wilderness, miles from the nearest trail. No witnesses, no chance of recovery. That's not how many of these cases start. Some happen within sight of established paths. Some happen in broad daylight. Some involve people with more outdoor experience than the rangers searching for them. And almost all of them share one unsettling feature. They don't behave like accidents. I'm not saying there's something out there taking people. I'm saying that, in these cases, people stop being reachable. And there's a difference. I've worked SAR for over a decade. My background isn't unusual. Law enforcement training, wilderness medicine, navigation, rope rescue, cold weather operations, helicopter coordination, dog teams, the kind of certifications that only matter when things go wrong. I've been involved in dozens of recoveries. Most of them end the same way. A call comes in, a timeline is established, search areas are prioritized, and eventually, something is found. Sometimes it's a body, sometimes it's gear. Sometimes it's a trail of evidence that tells us exactly how the person died. Closure doesn't make things easier for families, but it makes things comprehensible. The cases I'm talking about don't offer that. They stall. They freeze. They move in ways that don't match the terrain or the behavior of a lost person. I first encountered one of these cases early in my career. I didn't know what I was looking at the time. I just knew that something about it felt unfinished from the moment the call came in. The subject was a male hiker in his mid-40s, experienced, physically fit. Known medical issues. He was hiking with a small group on a marked trail inside a national park, clear weather, mild temperatures, good visibility. At one point, he lagged slightly behind the group. Not far. Not out of sight for more than a minute or two. When the group reached a junction, they realized he wasn't there. They doubled back immediately. He was gone. No sound. No movement in the brush. No sign of a fall or a scramble. Just absence. Search operations were initiated within hours. This is where people usually assume mistakes were made. They weren't. Dog teams were deployed the same day. The dogs picked up a scent trail almost immediately. That part wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how it ended. The trail didn't disperse. It didn't loop. It didn't degrade gradually. It stopped, abruptly, as if the subject had reached a point where he was no longer moving forward, or where forward no longer applied. Helicopters conducted aerial sweeps. Rangers performed grid searches. Volunteers combed areas that, statistically, should have produced something. Nothing turned up. No clothing. No equipment. No disturbed terrain. Weather remained stable. No storms rolled in to erase evidence. The park stayed open. People kept hiking past the same area where a man had simply ceased to be found. Weeks later, a piece of the hiker's gear was discovered. It was found uphill from the original trail, in an area that had already been searched multiple times. The item was intact, clean, not weather damaged. It looked placed. That detail matters. In SAR, we expect time to work against us. Fabric degrades, colors fade, objects move downhill. This didn't fit. When the report circulated internally, no one said it out loud, but everyone noticed. Because it wasn't the first time. Other cases had similar features. Clothing found neatly arranged. Remains appearing in previously searched locations. Children found alive after conditions that should not have been survivable. Individually, these details can be explained away. Together, they form a pattern we don't know how to document. Families ask questions. We answer carefully. We talk about exposure, disorientation, animal activity, terrain. We don't lie, but we don't connect cases either. Internally, files close without conclusions. FOIA requests come back partially redacted. Timelines get simplified. Nothing is falsified. It's just narrowed. The strangest realization I've had over the years is this. At a certain point, a missing person case stops being a rescue operation and becomes an administrative process. When that happens, everyone involved feels it. And no one talks about it. After that first case, I stopped treating these disappearances as isolated events. Not officially, not in reports, but privately, I started paying attention. Over the years, I worked or reviewed dozens of cases that shared the same underlying structure. Different parks, different terrain, different victims. The details changed. The behavior didn't. Some involved elderly hikers who vanished within minutes of being seen. Others involved children found alive days later in locations that search teams had already covered. A few involved hunters with military backgrounds, people trained to survive in worse conditions than what they faced that day. What stood out wasn't how they disappeared. It was how the search failed. In normal SAR operations, evidence disperses. Tracks degrade gradually. Dogs lose scent in predictable ways: wind, water, animal interference. In these cases, scent trails didn't fade. They terminated. Dogs would follow confidently and then stop, confused, at a single point. Handlers described it as if the trail simply ended, not weakened. Aerial searches produced the same result. Large areas thoroughly covered, nothing found, and then, sometimes weeks or months later, an item appearing in a place already searched. Boots, jackets, backpacks, often clean, often intact, placed where they could be found. That last part is important, because it creates closure without explanation. Publicly, these cases are treated the same as any other missing person investigation. Privately, the response changes after a certain point. Search intensity decreases, briefings become shorter, language shifts from recovery to documentation. No one announces this transition. You feel it. Budgets matter. Manpower matters. Parks stay open. Visitors keep coming. And statistically, national parks are still safe. That's the line we repeat because it's true. But safety doesn't mean predictability. I've sat in internal meetings where timelines were reduced to the bare minimum, where questions that couldn't be answered were quietly dropped instead of explored, not out of malice, but because there was nothing actionable to do with them. You can't file a report on an absence of mechanism. Families want to know why their loved one vanished so quickly, why a trained hiker could disappear within sight of a trail, why weather didn't seem to matter. We don't have those answers, so we give them the ones we do have, and then the file closes. Over time, rangers develop their own understanding. Not theories, boundaries. We learn which details to emphasize and which to omit. We learn how to speak about these cases without reinforcing fear or speculation. We learn how to answer FOIA requests accurately while keeping reports concise. And we learn something else. These cases don't escalate. They don't increase year over year. They don't cluster in a way that suggests a single cause. They persist at a low, steady rate, like background noise. That's what unsettles people once they notice it. Not the number of disappearances, but the consistency. Different decades, different administrations, different technology, same outcomes. People sometimes ask why these cases feel different. The answer is simple. They don't leave lessons behind. Most accidents teach us something. Don't hike alone. Don't ignore weather. Don't overestimate your abilities. These cases don't. There's no mistake to correct. No behavior to warn against. People do everything right and still don't come back. I still believe most disappearances have explanations. I still believe in evidence, training, and probability. And I still believe national parks are among the safest places you can be. But I also believe this. Some environments don't respond to human logic the way we expect them to. Some situations don't escalate into danger. They simply stop progressing. The people involved don't die violently. They don't leave signs of panic. They don't behave like victims. They just stop being reachable. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Because rescue depends on continuity, movement, time, traceable decisions. When continuity breaks, rescue becomes documentation, and documentation becomes silence. If you spend enough time in this line of work, you learn to live with unanswered questions. You learn that not every case resolves, and not every absence has a story that fits into language. The parks remain open. Trails remain marked. Visitors keep coming. And somewhere in the files, closed, archived, and rarely reopened, are cases that never reached an ending. Not because they were ignored, but because there was nowhere left to go. That's all I'm willing to say about missing 411 cases. Not because I'm afraid, but because everything beyond that point stops being useful.